Wade Langston had been waiting 3 months for a woman who would never come. The letter in his weathered hands promised a gentle schoolteacher named Margaret with brown hair and quiet manners. But the woman who stepped off that dusty trail carried a gun on her hip and secrets in her eyes that could burn a man alive. She called herself by the right name. She recited the things only Margaret should know. The town he'd grown up in, the scar on his left shoulder, how he took his coffee black but sweet. But when she smiled, it wasn't kindness. It was calculation. And there was blood drying on the heel of her boot. Wade stood at the edge of his porch, rifle loose in his hand, trying to make sense of the impossible. The wind kicked up dust and tension between them. She didn't flinch, just slid the rifle case off her shoulder, rested it like she'd done it 100 times before, and said, "You gonna invite me in, or do we die out here together?" Before Wade could answer, the sound of hooves shattered the silence. 3 riders crested the ridge just past the corral. Dust curled around them like smoke from hell's own fire. The woman's fingers brushed the butt of her revolver without looking. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't even glance at Wade. She crouched beside the porch step and motioned for him to take cover. He didn't move, not because he didn't want to, because something in him had already decided. He dropped beside her, shouldered his rifle, and whispered, "They after you?" "They're after what I saw," she said, "and who I became to outrun it." The lead rider stood in the stirrups, scanning the property. He shouted something Wade couldn't hear, but the tone was clear. Threat, not talk. The woman didn't blink. "If you've got a death wish, cowboy, now's the time to let it out." Wade's mouth was dry. His pulse thundered. But something in her, the way she watched the land, the measured breaths she took, like she'd counted the bullets she had and the distance to each tree, told him this wasn't her first ambush. She was waiting for a fight, and suddenly, so was he. He whispered, "You got a name?" "Margaret," she lied again. But her eyes softened, just for a breath. "Not the one my mama gave me, but it'll do for now." He didn't ask more. He didn't have to. A man knows when the storm's already at his door, and this one wasn't leaving without blood. The 3 riders split, one heading toward the barn, one toward the back fence, one keeping straight. Wade clicked the safety off. "Which one do you want?" He asked Dot. She smirked. "The one who's going to lie when he's dying." He nodded. "You're not a teacher, are you?" "No," she said, raising her revolver. "But I'll show you a lesson or two." And just like that, Wade Langston stopped waiting for Margaret. He started fighting for someone else entirely. Whoever she really was. She wasn't just running, she was surviving. And now, so was he. The gunfire didn't come all at once. It started with a single shot, sharp and deliberate, then silence thick enough to choke a man. Wade watched the woman fire, her arms steady, breath controlled, as if she were back in some memory far worse than this one. Her bullet hit the rider approaching the barn, sending him tumbling off his horse into the dust with a strangled cry. The other 2 scattered. Wade fired next, hitting one in the leg as he tried to circle around the water trough. The 3rd returned fire, missing Wade's head by less than an inch and splintering the porch beam. "Inside," Wade barked, grabbing the woman's arm. They rushed into the cabin. She didn't stumble. She moved like someone who knew how to retreat without losing ground. Inside, Wade slammed the door shut and dropped the iron latch. He turned to her, panting. "Who are you?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze swept the room. Window angles, exit points, shadows. Only after she checked the chamber on her revolver did she look at him and say, "My name's Dixie Hargrove." Wade felt his knees go weak. "That's not the name I've been writing to." "No," she said quietly. "Because Margaret's dead." The words hit harder than any bullet. Wade staggered back like she'd struck him. "You're lying. I wish I was." Dixie leaned against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor, the revolver still in her lap. "We shared a coach out of Kansas City. She was sweet. Talked about you like a dream she was still trying to believe in. That night we stopped at a way station. Parker and Voss were already there. The names made Wade's stomach turn. He knew them. Cattle rustlers with blood on their hands and silver in their smiles. "They were looking for me," she went on. "They saw her. Thought she was me. I tried to warn her, tried to get her to leave, but she was too polite. Too kind. I heard her scream. Dixie swallowed hard. Her voice cracked for the first time. I buried her myself. Took the letters from her bag. Took her name. I figured if I looked enough like her, they'd follow me. Not some schoolteacher with dreams about a rancher she never met. Wade sat heavily on the edge of the table, staring at his shaking hands. I wrote to her for months. I know. I read them. Then why come here? Dixie looked up. Because I didn't want her to die for nothing. The silence returned, thicker this time. Outside, one of the wounded men groaned. The horses had scattered, but danger still circled like vultures waiting for the last breath. You could have just run. Wade said finally, I've been running my whole life. She met his eyes. Figured it was time to stand. Wade stood, jaw tight. His fingers found the worn handle of his rifle again, but this time there was no hesitation. Then I'll stand with you. She blinked. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. You came here with a lie and a purpose. But somewhere in the middle, you told the truth. That's more than I've gotten from most folks lately. She stared at him for a long beat. Then, slowly, her shoulders eased. I don't deserve your help. Wade moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. Neither did Margaret. But she still got hurt. And so will a whole lot more if those men keep breathing. From outside, a distant voice called, Dixie, you come out now, and we'll make it quick. She didn't flinch. Wade looked over his shoulder, his voice steady. Next time they call your name, they'll be bleeding when they say it. She smiled, not the cold smile from earlier, but something softer, sadder. Real Dot and Wade Langston, a man who'd expected a wife and found a war, realized he wasn't protecting a stranger anymore. He was protecting the truth. By dawn, they had moved the wounded man into the barn and tied him up tight. The other had crawled off somewhere during the night and left a trail of blood heading north. Wade figured the crows would find him before any doctor did. Inside the Cholney cabin, Dixie sat at Wade's rough-hewn table, tracing the rim of a chipped coffee cup, her fingers twitching like they still hadn't left the gunfight behind. Wade poured water into a tin basin and handed her a cloth. She looked up, those sharp green eyes meeting his. Time you knew the rest of it, she said. Wade sat down across from her, rifle resting on his lap. Dixie took a breath. It started in Kansas City. I was working under Marshal Rigsby, real name Hargrove, like mine. My older brother, he recruited me. Said the cattle rustling was getting worse and someone was feeding it. Not just local crooks, but something higher. Military contracts were being padded, invoices faked, and the missing heads of cattle were ending up on government stock lists. But there were too many hands in the pot to know who was doing the feeding. Wade frowned. That why you were running? I got too close. She leaned forward, voice low. A man named Voss runs the fake ledgers. Parker, the one shouting outside yesterday, he handles the blood. They've been using native raids as cover, stealing cattle, torching homesteads, then blaming the tribes. Soldiers get paid to retaliate. Contractors get bonuses. Everyone wins, except the people who lose their homes. Wade's stomach twisted. And Margaret? She didn't know anything. She was just in the wrong place. They mistook her for me. Wade stood abruptly, pacing. This ain't just outlaw work. This is a war for profit. Dixie nodded. And you're sitting on land they want. See, they can't keep pushing this scheme unless they control routes like yours. The creeks, the grazing. They need it all to keep covering their tracks. Wade exhaled slowly. His father had always said men will kill for 3 things: land, pride, and secrets. Now he was staring at all 3 in the same woman's eyes. You didn't just come here for cover, Wade said finally. You came here because this place matters. It does now, Dixie replied. We've got one of their men tied up in your barn, and I've already wired Marshal Rigsby. Told him to bring backup. Wade raised an eyebrow. You trust him? He's my brother, and he's got a score to settle with Voss. Just then the tied-up man in the barn let out a long groan, followed by a coughing fit. Wade peered out the window, saw the man slumped against a beam, barely conscious. You think he'll talk? Wade asked. He'd better, Dixie said, standing. Or I'll put the questions in his wounds instead." Wade stopped her at the door. "You're not alone in this anymore." She looked at him, unsure. "I mean it," Wade said. "I was expecting a wife, not a war. But now that I know the truth, I can't look the other way. You saved lives coming here, Margaret's included. I owe her at least that much." Dixie nodded, jaw tight. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I was born ready," Wade said. "Just didn't know what for." Outside, thunder cracked in the distance. Clouds gathered above the horizon, like judgment waiting to fall inside. Wade and Dixie loaded their rifles in silence, not for survival this time, but for justice. The marshals arrived just before noon. 4 men, dust-covered and quiet-eyed, rode in from the North Trail like a ghost posse summoned by blood and telegram. At their lead was Marshal Everett Rigsby, tall, lean, mustached like a riverboat gambler, and mean-looking in a way that only meant one thing. He didn't bluff. He dismounted slowly, his boots hitting Wade's soil with the weight of history. Wade shook his hand, surprised by the grip. But what startled him more was the way Rigsby looked at Dixie, like a brother who had already grieved her once. "You all right, Dix?" he asked, low and tense. "I've been better," she said, offering him a small, bruised smile. "But we've got one of 'em in the barn. The others will circle back." "They always do." Rigsby nodded, then glanced at Wade. "You armed?" Wade tapped his rifle. "Always. Good. Then let's end this." The marshals took their positions, one in the trees near the back fence, another crouched in the hayloft, one riding wide to flank the eastern ridge. Wade and Dixie stayed near the cabin. It was quiet for an hour. Too quiet. Then the crows lifted off the trees in a black wave. Wade turned just as a shot rang out. From the ridge, chaos erupted. Riders burst through the brush, their rifles blazing. One marshal went down near the fence. Another returned fire from the loft, hitting a rider clean off his horse. Dixie crouched behind a barrel and took aim. She didn't miss. 2 men fell before Wade fired a single shot. But then, in the blur of motion, one rider broke through the lines and charged the porch. Wade barely saw it, just the flash of a gun, the glint of metal, the rising dust, before Dixie leapt from cover, straight into the rider's path. The gun fired, and Dixie spun, blood blooming across her shoulder like a cursed flower. "No!" Wade screamed, dropping his rifle and catching her as she fell. He dragged her back behind the water trough, bullets slicing the air above them. "Stay with me, Dixie," he begged, pressing his hand to the wound. "Don't you dare close your eyes." "I'm fine," she rasped, but her face was white, her breath thin. Rigsby appeared a moment later, firing over their heads, shouting orders. Wade couldn't hear through the roar of his own heartbeat. Then silence again. The last rider slumped from his saddle and hit the dirt. Voss lay bleeding near the barn, still breathing, but broken. The fight was over. Wade cradled Dixie, her blood soaking his shirt, his hands, the earth beneath him. "You're not dying," he whispered. "You're too damn stubborn." Dixie coughed a laugh. "You finally figured that out?" He smiled, despite the fear in his chest. Rigsby knelt beside them, eyes darting over her wound. "She'll live," he said. "Clean shot through the shoulder. We'll get a doctor from Clancy." Wade nodded, but his eyes never left hers. Dixie looked up at him, pain etched in every line of her face. "I didn't expect to stay," she said softly. "Not here. Not with anyone. You don't have to decide now," Wade said. "I already did," she whispered. "The second I took that bullet." Wade kissed her forehead and held her close, as the dust settled and the dead stayed still, and for the first time in weeks the land was quiet again. The cabin smelled like iron and whiskey. Dixie winced as the marshal's medic stitched her shoulder under lamplight. Wade sat nearby, silent, his jaw clenched so tight it looked carved from stone. He hadn't let her out of his sight since the shootout. Not when she bled. Not when she passed out. Not even when Rigsby pulled him aside to talk. "Tell her to rest," the medic said, tying the final knot. "I'm fine," Dixie muttered. "You're not," Wade replied, standing up. "But you will be." She closed her eyes for a moment, face pale, lips dry. "I've had worse." Rigsby entered, tossing his hat on the table. "The prisoner's not talking." Voss lost too much blood. If he makes it till morning, I'll be surprised. Wade rubbed his temples. Then we need another way to bring the rest of them down. I've got an idea, Dixie said, sitting up straighter. But you're not going to like it. Wade didn't flinch. Say it. We bait a trap, she said. They know I'm still breathing. Parker's out there somewhere, waiting to finish the job. We send word I'm being moved. Just me, no marshals. Just a rancher escorting his injured bride out of town. Wade frowned. And when they come, we lead them to the game trail behind Devil's Rock, she said. They'll expect a straight ambush. But you know that land better than they ever will. Rigsby and his men flank from above. You and I ride in slow. Make it look real. Rigsby scratched his chin. It's bold, risky. It's justice, Wade said. Dixie looked over at him. You sure? I buried my cousin near that trail after a raid last spring, he replied. They blamed it on the Pawnee. But I saw the tracks. Steel horseshoes. Federal issue. My gut's been screaming ever since, she softened. This isn't just revenge for Margaret anymore, is it? He shook his head. It's bigger than us. Suddenly something hit the front window with a heavy thunk. Wade was up in a flash, rifle raised. Rigsby drew his pistol. The medic ducked. Wade stepped onto the porch and found a rock wrapped in torn canvas, a message scrawled in charcoal. Trade the girl for safe passage. Sunrise, no tricks. Parker brought it inside. Dixie read it and laughed bitterly. Trade me. Like a sack of grain? Wade looked to Rigsby. They're scared. Otherwise they wouldn't be asking. They know she's got federal protection now, Rigsby said. That's why they're panicking. No, Dixie said, voice low. They're not panicking. They're planning. Wade turned to her. You still want to go through with your trap? She nodded. More than ever. He knelt beside her, voice steady. If we do this, you ride with me. Not as bait. As my partner. Her expression wavered for just a second, not with doubt, but something softer. And if I say yes? Wade held her gaze. Then I protect you, no matter how bad it gets. Her hand reached for his calloused fingers, sliding into his palm. Then let's end this. Devil's Rock wasn't much to look at, just a crooked column of red stone rising from the prairie like a warning finger pointed at heaven. But Wade knew every ridge and trail surrounding it. His father used to say, if you want to catch a wolf, you don't run. You dig a hole and wait. They were digging deep this time. At dawn, Wade and Dixie rode together, her arm in a sling, his rifle strapped across his back. They moved slow, just like Parker expected. No marshal escort, no extra guns. Just two people heading into the jaws of something wicked. Dixie wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low and a shawl over her injured side. Wade glanced at her now and then, every part of him tense, but not from fear. From focus. The kind a man feels before a storm breaks loose. Rigsby and his men were already in position. Wade had shown them the hollow ridge above the trail, the creek bed running dry where ambushers could lie hidden, and the outcrop that offered clean sight lines to the rock itself. Parker wouldn't see it. Coming, they reached the trailhead just past sunrise. Devil's Rock cast a long, jagged shadow across the ground. As planned, Wade dismounted first, lifted Dixie down slow, making it look like she was barely holding on. Then came the signal, 3 sharp caws from a crow overhead. Rigsby's man. They're close, Dixie murmured. Wade stepped forward, rifle in hand, and shouted into the open. I got your trade. But I want to see you, Parker. Nothing. Then footsteps. And from behind the boulders 5 men emerged, rifles drawn. At their center, Parker, gray-haired, thick-bodied, and grinning like the devil himself. Well, I'll be, he called. You actually brought her. Wade didn't blink. You want her? Come get her. Parker held up his hands. Let's not play tough, Langston. You've got 1 gun. I've got 5. Dixie stepped forward, voice cold. You forgot the ones in the trees. Parker's face twisted, but before he could react, a shot rang out. His second man dropped. Then another shot, one clean through the thigh of the man closest to Wade. Chaos. Gunfire cracked from every angle. Rigsby's men opened fire from the ridge, picking them off one by one. Parker screamed something unintelligible as he ducked behind a boulder. Wade sprinted forward, taking cover, squeezing off careful shots. Dixie hit the ground and rolled, drawing her revolver with her good arm. She fired twice, both bullets hitting home. One man dead, the other screaming on the dirt dot. Then it was just Parker. Rigsby called out, "Throw down your weapon." But Parker didn't. He broke cover, firing wildly, making a run for the trees. Dixie stood, aimed one-handed, and fired. Parker's leg snapped out from under him, and he went down hard, screaming, gun still clutched in his hand. Wade strode up and kicked the weapon away. Rigsby approached, cuffs in hand. "Been a long time coming, Parker." The man just spat blood into the dirt and grinned. "You think this stops it? We were just one branch of the tree. Then we'll burn the whole damn tree." Rigsby growled as the marshals dragged the last of the men away. Wade turned to Dixie. She leaned against a rock, catching her breath, hair wild in the wind. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "It's over." He walked to her, took her hand, and looked around the scorched land that had seen too much blood. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." 3 weeks passed before the land remembered how to breathe. The fields turned green again. The air smelled of horses, dust, and rain instead of gunpowder. Wade repaired the fence himself, hammering in new boards like each nail could keep the past from blowing back in. Dixie healed slowly. The stitches held, and so did her silence. She spent most mornings sitting on the porch in Wade's flannel shirt, one sleeve rolled up over the sling, the other dangling loose. A jar of lavender soap sat beside her, cracked open. Margaret's found in the satchel she'd died carrying. Dixie kept it like a vigil. Wade never asked why. One afternoon a courier rode up the trail, dust clouding behind him. He handed over a thick envelope marked with the seal of the Territorial Marshal Service. Dixie didn't open it right away. Wade was tending the garden, beans and onions, mostly when she finally joined him, paper in hand. "They're offering me a badge," she said. Wade stopped digging. "Official?" "Permanent. Assistant Marshal. Full jurisdiction. They want me in Santa Fe by month's end." He nodded slowly. "You gonna take it?" "I don't know." She looked down at the soil, her boots digging small half-moons into the earth. "It's what I've trained for. What I thought I wanted." "What?" She held up the soap jar. "Margaret wanted this. A simple life. A man worth loving. Dirt under her nails. A porch. A garden. Quiet. You think you want that now?" Wade asked, voice low. "I didn't used to," she said. "Didn't think I could survive it. Peace was harder than war, somehow. But then I started noticing things, like the way you talk to the land. How the cabin creaks at night like it's trying to whisper something kind. The way you check the stove twice because you're afraid someone might still be cold." He chuckled. Embarrassed, she stepped closer. "You didn't fall for me. You stood next to me. Through all of it. I didn't think that kind of man still existed." Wade wiped his hands on his jeans. "I was expecting a wife in a blue dress who'd bake pies and sing church hymns." She smiled. "And you got a half-crippled woman with a revolver scar and blood on her boots." "I got a hell of a lot more than that," he said. "I got someone who made me see this land different. Made me feel things I thought I'd buried." She hesitated. "So if I stayed," he stepped forward, took her hand. "Then we build something together. Something honest. Something that doesn't run." She looked down at the badge letter again, then at the soap jar in her hand. She turned it once, then tossed it gently into the bucket of water beside them. Lavender bloomed in the air. "I'm not running," she said, and when she leaned in to kiss him, there was no fear left in her. Only peace. 6 months later, the Langston place didn't look much like it used to. The old barn had a fresh coat of paint. The garden had doubled in size, with tomatoes staked tall and proud beside rows of carrots and green beans. A second chicken coop had gone up near the back fence, courtesy of a traveling preacher who'd stayed the winter and paid in lumber. And on the front porch, nailed beside the doorframe, hung a hand-carved sign that read, "The Refuge House." Wade had built it with his own hands. Dixie had named it. Women came from all over. Runaways, war widows, girls too young to carry the grief they bore. Some stayed a week. Some stayed for good. No one asked questions. The only rule was simple. No harm crosses this fence. Dixie walked among them like a warden and a sister, all at once. The sling was gone now, but the scar on her shoulder stayed, a reminder she wore openly. When folks asked about it, she'd smile and say, "I used to chase justice. Now I grow it." Wade still worked the land, but there was more laughter now. More dinners at a long table, more shoes by the door, more hands passing down stories around the fire. He'd never imagined sharing his home with so many, but somehow it never felt crowded that one evening. As the sun painted the sky in colors too wild for any painter to name, Wade stood by the fence, watching Dixie braid the hair of a girl who'd just arrived 2 nights prior. The child hadn't spoken yet, but her shoulders were finally starting to lower, like she didn't expect to be struck. Wade's heart ached in a way he'd never known. Dixie looked up, caught his eye, and nodded. They were doing something good. Later that night, as they lay in bed, the windows open to let in the spring breeze, Dixie whispered, "You ever miss it? The quiet?" Wade rolled onto his side, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. "Not for a second," she smiled. "Even with all the boots by the door?" "Especially because of the boots," he said. "Every pair means someone found their way here." She was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, "Think Margaret would have liked it?" He wrapped his arm around her. "I think she'd be proud you carried her dream." Dixie nestled into him, breathing deep. "We didn't build this from nothing." "No," Wade agreed. "We built it from ashes, and outside under the stars the prairie stayed still, not with fear, but with peace."